Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Homelessness in Australia is increasing rapidly. In 2011, the census found that over 105,000 Australians were homeless, an increase of a massive 17% since the previous census. As we await the results of the most recent census, all signals are pointing to yet another increase in the figures. And yet, there are real faces and personal stories of heartbreak behind the statistics. It is almost impossible to contemplate how there can be over 100,000 Australian men, women and children, and many of them families. And how can so many Australians be on the streets, surfing couches and sleeping in cars? How can this happen in a prosperous society such as Australia, and how can we be failing so many people? We all know about the growing crisis of housing affordability in Australia. Less and less Australians are able to start down the path to home ownership. And as home ownership rates decline, we are also seeing the rise of property owning class. Let me be clear, there is nothing inherently wrong with the idea of Australians striving to own investment properties. However, this needs to be balanced with the need to ensure that there's adequate housing available to all Australians, and for us to continue to be the land of opportunity, as Australians need to be able to have a fair go at buying their own home. The current structure of the housing market is concentrating Australia's housing wealth in the hands of a few people, accelerating their own wealth and income inequality in Australia. And yet, although this is a large piece of the puzzle, housing affordability is by no means the story, but the only story behind the tragedy of rising homelessness in Australia. Alongside the rise of the property class, there is also the rise of the precarious worker who finds themselves in insecure employment, assuming they can find employment at all. And the great decline of manufacturing in Australia is only exacerbating this trend. Decreasing the stable employment opportunities for semi-skilled, unskilled and entry-level workers are combining with underemployment to create a swelling underclass. Domestic violence is another piece of the homelessness puzzle, and St Vincent de Paul indicated that domestic violence is a factor of 36% of homelessness cases. And to echo their recent report in the Ache for Home, if Australia wants to seriously deal with domestic violence effectively, then it is necessary to address the crisis of social and affordable housing. The leading cause of homelessness in my electorate is family violence. There are 48 people per 10,000 head of population without homes in Mayo, compared with 38 per 10,000 across South Australia. More Australians than ever before are becoming homeless or at imminent risk of homelessness, and every dollar spent now helps to prevent more Australians from falling out of secure housing. And according to the Swinburne University, youth homelessness alone costs the community more than $600 million per year in additional health and criminal justice services. Preventative spending on homelessness is not just an investment in the future of vulnerable Australians, it's also an investment in the sustainability of federal and state budgets. This is why certainty and continuity of funding to address homelessness is so critical, and the current National Partnership on Homelessness, which runs out next July, is yet to be renewed by the federal government and is causing great concern. I am increasingly concerned that the federal government intends to walk away from their funding commitments to homelessness. I invite the government to allay my concerns, and I urge the government to renew the National Partnership Agreement on Homelessness as soon as possible. I also urge the federal government to provide longer-term funding in any partnership agreement that they negotiate. The short-term funding agreements are increasingly seeing regular valleys of death in the sectors that they affect, with good quality staff moving on because their jobs cannot be guaranteed until continued funding is announced. This stop-start funding results in reducing the efficacy of the money that the government does spend, giving the critical importance to early intervention with services that support homelessness. We just cannot afford to give piecemeal funding. Australia cannot afford to resort to last-minute short-term deals if it wants to address this problem as effectively as possible. To the government I say, to the thousands of Australians who are either homeless or facing homelessness, we are relying on you to act, and act with urgency. Please do not dismiss this issue as a matter for individual states to carry alone. Thank you.